yes, participation points.
Cool. Okay. So I have awesome. Okay. Let me share my screen. Ethics of AI, Roboethics and Neuroethics by Claire and Damian.
Yes. So let's open this by addressing how we address technological controversy. So, as machine learning advances, many concerns have been raised, and this is inevitable in technology. With the following having been popular opinion, and some of them are still popular opinion. For example, telephones will destroy personal communication, writing will destroy memory, video cassette will make going out redundant, and some of these are broadly correct but moderately relevant, as in digital technology will destroy industries like photographic film, cassette tapes, or vinyl records. But some are even broadly correct and fundamental and deeply relevant, as in cars will kill children and fundamentally change the landscape. Both are correct, and both have actually been major problems as of late. Um, so the purpose of this discussion is to analyze these issues and to confront the non-issues of the ethics of AI, and also generalize to the philosophical framework through which we can address technological controversy, any type of technological controversy. Because one of the main things that must be done before addressing the ethical and political issues of some technology is actually obtaining an understanding of said technology in the first place.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard about the. I don't know if you've heard about the controversies about self-driving cars and whether or not we're training them to be somewhat subconsciously racist or biased towards certain people, and so that is an issue that we have been trying to address, or at least researchers have been.
Yeah, we're actually fortunate to have many hundreds of attendees at AngelHacks. Anyway, moving on. Could you go to the next one?
But yeah, I am on addressing technological
Oh,
controversy.
it was delayed for me anyway. So the ethics of AI and robotics has been significantly covered in recent years, but also ends up undermining it. The press often discusses issues, as if discuss issues or just predictions of what future technologies will bring, and as though we already know what would be most ethical and how to achieve that, when that is most certainly not the case. And in fact, there are a number of confounding exogenous factors, such as image and public relations influencing how these types of issues are discussed in policy and industry. So, again, all of this just undermines the very definition of an issue, a problem we don't readily know how to correctly approach. For example, um, job loss, theft, or killing with AI are not ethical problems in themselves, but whether these are permissible under certain circumstances is. Are these functions of AI that can in some way be utilized in some meaningful and philosophically just way? So AI ethics, after having achieved functional artificial intelligence, is a very young field. Um, we only got the first working neural networks very recently. So it's again a very young topic in applied ethics with very few well-established issues and no authoritative overviews, although that is like. So, what is intelligence exactly? So, artificial intelligence is broadly understood as any kind of artificial computational system that shows intelligent behavior conducive to reaching goals. And in this context, intelligence shouldn't be restricted to what would require intelligence if done by humans. And in the context of roboethics, we use a broader term. So in particular, the broader definition of intelligence groups AI in three categories. One, artificial narrow intelligence, ANI, represents all existing AI, including the most complicated and capable that has ever been created to date. It can only perform specific tasks autonomously using human-like capabilities. So an example of ANI might have been an AI that you worked on or learned about during the Spirit AI workshop, wherein you discussed an AI that can sort images into cats and dogs. So that machine would be able to do that with human-like capabilities in many cases. With trained properly and programmed properly, it could in fact probably be more capable of categorizing images as cats and dogs than any human. Um, but even then, that's all it can do. We didn't program it to be capable of doing anything else, nor did we program it to be able to teach itself how to do other things. Therefore, it's ANI. Next, artificial general intelligence, or AGI. So AI agents like these can learn, perceive, understand, and function completely like, indistinguishably to, a human. So, for example, you might have seen androids in science fiction. Human-like robots that can teach themselves and understand the world very similarly to how we do. Um, Unlike the cat-dog vision AI, it can do more than one thing, and it can even teach itself how to do other things. So it is therefore an AGI. And finally, and this is really the most worrying aspect of AI ethics, and it's largely why we want to talk about these issues in the first place. Artificial super intelligence, or ASI. So these AI are the most capable forms of intelligence on Earth and the current pinnacle of AI research. So not only would they be androids that could be just as intelligent, if not a little more intelligent than any human, they would be far more intelligent than a human, possibly incomprehensibly intelligent. We wouldn't even be able to comprehend theoretically how intelligent some of these super intelligent forms are just by definition.
Yeah. So if you've ever read any of Isaac Asimov's short stories, you might realize that some of the characters in there have reached AGI or ASI levels. And so a lot of Asimovs and other science fiction writers have had their science fiction become reality, and others not so very much. And so this just means that in the future, we are very likely to reach levels of artificial superintelligence. But before we get there, we actually have to think about, how do we make it? What should we think about? How do we train it? What ethics are involved with this AI?
So there are three types. So these three types of intelligence can be more precisely categorized by the following four types of intelligent machines. So they all tie in to the aspects that we talked about earlier, but instead of classifying types of AI by their level of intelligence, we classify them by their hardware. And more specific capabilities. So first, reactive machines that have no memory and only respond to a few specific stimuli. So for example, the cat dog classifier could be reactive. So it will just react to the image, classify it, and then do away with it. It has
Or,
no memory of what it's previously done, and it can't learn anything new.
or the hot dog or not hot dog
Yeah, dog or not hot
app
dog.
from Silicon Valley.
Yes. Number two, limited memory machines can use memory to learn and continually improve responses. So, for example, a limited memory machine might
Yeah.
be a cognitive adversarial network. So it can teach itself, and it has memory of what it did, so it can improve upon its craft.
So this is like where you train an AI, like CNNs or LSTMs, or like an example would be GPT-3, something like that.
Number three, theory of mind machines, and this is where things really start to get a little creepy. These machines understand the needs of other intelligent entities. That we haven't quite been able to create any theory of mind machines, although there are currently some in progress. And really the main debate is that creating a robot that understands human consciousness, and maybe even has human consciousness, requires that we learn more about human consciousness, which is still a famously ununderstood thing. Um, so alongside that might bring other concerns in like psychoethics. Number four, finally, self-aware machines that have human-like intelligence and self-awareness. So it's more capable than any of the other three, and it has great theory of mind, and it is this fourth option that addresses John Searle's notion of cognitive state, understanding strong AI that violates the Chinese room argument, and self-aware, self-improving superintelligence could achieve a hypothesized singularity from which the development of AI grows chaotic and out of control.
Self-aware machines, no matter a insecure robot or a robot that's always sad or a rude robot. I don't know. Okay, kind of pushing it. So AI is very popular in fiction. And one very, very famous depiction is Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, published in 1967. So it's about, in the Cold War, there was like, I don't know if everyone has heard of the Cold War. And during that, it generated a world war between the US, Soviet Union, and China. So this is fictional, who have built an Allied Master Computer, or AM, to manage weapons and troops. So this is preventing counterattacks and counterstrikes. And one AM eventually acquires self-awareness, which is the fourth type of intelligence we talked about, and commits vast genocide that ends mankind. 109 years later, AM has only left 4 men and 1 woman alive, and keeping them in captivity within an endless underground complex to torture them to eternity. It's a very dystopian book, and it talks about how these 4 people try to escape. I'm not gonna.
It's probably the most distressing science fiction story, or really just piece of fiction I've ever read.
It is very disturbing. If you don't want to read it, you can always read the Wikipedia page to traumatize yourself only mildly. But yes, it is a very interesting book, and it does talk about the risks of having an AI acquiring self-awareness. Because if humans were to acquire self-awareness, and we do have self-awareness, we are not as powerful as a computer could be if they were to, just because of pure computational power.
So ultimately, humanity ends with AM transforming one of the men into the titular monster.
Do you want me to read this, or you can read this? You can read it very dramatically.
It's a fun quote to you, but I can let you read it.
Okay. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about, a thing that can never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien, a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly, alone, here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of AM, whom we created because our time was badly spent and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least the 4 of them are safe at last. AM will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier. And yet, AM has won. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream.
There's also another interesting quote that alludes to the dangers of instilling the theory of mind in intelligent machines, is this opening quote to the video game. That is kind of like the famous argument on vegetarianism, and that we should eat animals because they experience negative emotions from Peter Singer, in that if we can teach robots, intelligent machines, to understand the theory of mind and positive emotions, then they should therefore, by symmetry, learn how to comprehend and feel negative emotions. I hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits and wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. You hate. Okay, moving on.
Moving on. Asimov's Law of Robotics. I love Isaac Asimov. Oh, okay. So AI depicting science fiction also formalized roboethics. Fun fact, Asimov actually coined the term robotics. And so through his many stories, I don't know if you read it, such as The Little Robot Who Could Run Around. There were a lot of books and stories that he wrote that were very, very fundamental to how we think about robotics of today. And one of the biggest things that he created were the 3 laws of robotics. And the rest, most of his stories really just involved him going through the 3 laws of robotics and seeing how they could actually solve the many moral quandaries and issues that could come up with, working with robots. So the first rule is a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. So that's the first rule, and that takes precedence over all other rules. The second one is a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict the first law. And so you can see the second law outrules the third law, but is overruled by the first law. And finally, the third one, yes, they're deontological. If they were util, we would all die. 3, a robot who must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So the third one is not necessarily just to preserve robots. They also want to preserve their own existence because it's possible that their own self-destruction can hurt another human being. And so these 3 laws work together very well to prevent almost every issue you could think of. If any of you guys could think of one scenario that could not be solved by one of these 3 laws, you should send it in chat. I'd be very interested. But yes, how many people have read Isaac Asimov? Yeah, I've read almost all of his stories. I remember one of his stories talked about a BCI interface for piloting a plane. That was one of my favorites. How does this work from a deontological framework? Well, every single human being is worth more than the entire population of robots. So, this is like massively simplifying it, but it's really just emphasizing. Yeah, through an action or through inaction. Yeah, so if you don't allow, so they might watch a human being come into harm and not do anything, and that is also not allowed. So yeah, a human is going to murder other through humans. So this is why this is deontological. The AI will still try to preserve that. It'll still try to preserve that one human being. If the AI knows, it'll also attempt to preserve the other ones.
There are a number of scenarios that could evoke contradictions between the laws, but generally, it's the first or second law that takes precedence, for the second or third.
The robot kills all. Yeah, we should be glad it's not util. All right.
And also, it has been recognized that even then, these laws can be like formalized, can be better formalized, and in fact, they have. And actually, as we'll see in a second, expanded laws inspired by them are actually were actually passed in some Southeast Asian legislature. Anyway, so the Inevitable Conflict, a novel of Asimov, also generalized the first law to mean no machine may harm humanity, or through an action allow humanity to come to harm, providing a more collectivist viewpoint of what robots can and shouldn't do. So the laws were revisited in the end of Foundation and Earth, another novel, which introduces zeroth law. The others were suitably rewritten. So zeroth law. A robot may not injure humanity or by inaction allow humanity to come to harm. So even then, it was selected to take even greater precedence than the other ones. Perhaps some of you are aware that like other famous trios of laws, like the laws of Newtonian mechanics or the laws of thermodynamics, sometimes have a zeroth law, with a zeroth law being some like usually pretty obvious thing that takes precedence over everything else and is the logical underpinning of everything in that field. So the Fermi paradox is an interesting one, and there are a number of possible explanations to it. And it's not impossible. There is nothing that strictly prohibits the Fermi paradox being true, as in there are no other extraterrestrial organizations. It's not likely. It's likely there are at least some other intelligent alien forms, even if they're not quite as advanced as humanity, at least by strict probability. But again, it's not impossible.
It could be a prime directive situation where there's a federation out there that thinks that we're still primitive and does not want to interact with us until we reach a certain threshold. For those of you who like Star Trek.
That's one proposed explanation.
It's a very outlandish one, sorry.
Kind of outlandish, but it could be true. There's no
Could
reason. Well, okay, that depends on the precise circumstances. when a robot makes another robot. Um, Actually, that brings us into another interesting scenario. The gray goo. The gray goo scenario. Wherein, well, okay, Occam's razor, it does, but Occam's razor doesn't give you the answer to everything, and it doesn't mean that like more outlandish explanations are impossible. It just means that they're less likely than simple ones. And at any rate, if we were to take Occam's razor, um, then it would probably point us into somewhere that, by strict probability, the simplest explanation is that there are extraterrestrial organizations. Um, we just haven't been able to contact them for some limiting reasons. Anyway, let's move on to a sociological perspective, human-robot interactions. So human-robot interactions, HRI, pay significant attention to ethical matters, the dynamics of perception from both sides, and both the different interests present in and the intricacy of the social context, including co-working. So while AI can be used to manipulate humans into believing and doing things, um, should they break the laws of robotics to do so, it can also be used to drive robots that are problematic if their processes or appearance involve deception, threaten human dignity, or violate the Kantian requirement of respect for humanity. So our human tendency to recognize human-like objects as our own kind, a neuroscientific phenomenon known as pareidolia, and can deceive us into attributing more intellectual or even emotional significance to humanoid robots or AI systems than they deserve. Um, Very sorry now. Who is a cute robot shown in right? And there actually have been some ethics papers written on how now should be redesigned because he violates the law of robotics due to how cute he is. Anyway,
Actually, Alex brought up a romance robot, and in one of Asimov's stories, there has been one. You should check it out. I'm not going to go into detail, but it was a very interesting story.
romance robots in a second. Okay,
Oh
so
yeah, care robots.
the use of robots in healthcare remains at the level of concept studies in real environments, but is becoming increasingly usable, raising concerns for a dystopian future of dehumanized care. So first, current systems include supporting human caregivers as medical assistants. Two, will they ever become care robots beyond a behavioral sense of performing tasks in care environments? A major concern in HRI. An intentional, more conscious level of care cannot be provided by foreseeable robots right now. And finally, a system that pretends to care would be deceptive and therefore problematic by traditional normative ethics, including the roboethics we talked about. Two, companionship robots. So, tech optimists have argued that humans will likely be comfortable with the robotic approach to emotional and physical relationships. Given the variety of human relationship preferences, this approach growing commonplace seems likely. So the primary concern is whether devices should be manufactured and promoted, and whether there should be limits in this such area. Eric, that's kind of the point. And robots for physical relationships could also provide valuable insight into the psychology and neuroscience of objectophilia. Um, okay, for my personal opinion, um, really, I think that at every stage of the AI development process, we should really consider and analyze ethical frameworks as thoroughly as we can, at very least in anticipation of something worse. And really, I think it's already getting kind of problematic, even for some AI systems that could already raise concerns. Um, but as for similar moral considerations to humans, then probably when they reach nearly human-like capabilities. Well, it's not an impossibility, Kai. Uh,
Yeah, I think there's definitely people who would program her. I
no,
feel like there have been people who've already done that,
there
like
are
very
absolutely
mildly.
people who would program torture robots, and in fact, I believe some already exist. There are people all go like there are people that would program robots for any conceivable purpose. And really, we need to be prepared for how we should address each one. Oh, okay.
Okay, let's keep going. Privacy and surveillance.
Simplification. Anyway, so on to another set of famous issues: privacy and surveillance. A particularly pressing discussion in AI concerns the access of machines to private data and personally identifiable data. Privacy has been recognized in several aspects as the right to be let alone, information privacy, privacy as an aspect of personhood, control over information about oneself, and the right to secrecy. So the digital sphere, as I'm sure you're aware, maybe especially the older ones in the crowd, has widened very significantly in like the last decade. And AI increases both the possibilities of intelligent data collection and the possibilities for data analysis. So many new AI technologies amplify known issues about controlling who collects which data and who has access. For example, face recognition in photos and videos allows identification and profiling, and data can be fabricated and transmitted via deepfakes. I mean, giving the robot zero IQ, then that would just tarnish the prospect of using AI for anything. AI, when employed properly and the ethics are properly addressed, can certainly benefit human society. It's just that the main thing is that we really need to be careful about how we address the ethics of things, because if we don't, then it could easily run humanity into the ground.
Yeah. So someone kind of asked who would ever program a robot to value freedom over servitude. And there's a lot of people who might do that. For example, they might be misguided people who are like, if you made a robot feel like they were free, it would be more ethical. Or people who are like who know the risks and purposely want to harm.
Also,
Or even people doing research, right? They would be curious, like we can't actually experience slavery on humans. So what if they try to do it on robots? How would robots feel?
people are inevitably going to at least experiment with
Yeah.
robot treatment of freedom versus servitude. And also, there's always the possibility of people just making mistakes. Oopsie daisies, I made an AI system intelligent of destroying the entire human race.
Yeah. I mean, once again, curiosity is a very big part of humanity. So just keep that in mind. All right. Automation and employment.
So AI and robots will clearly lead to significant gains in productivity, which is also one of the main reasons we want to employ them, and thus overall wealth. However, gains through automation would typically mean that fewer humans are required for the same output. However, this doesn't necessarily imply a loss of overall employment, which is what many people are worried about, because available wealth increases, and that can increase demand of sufficiently to counteract the productivity gain. So instead of completely disrupting the economy, it would just be it would just be an ideally controlled displacement that ultimately, ideally, doesn't result in the loss of any economic individuals. So in the long run, higher productivity in industrial societies has led to more wealth overall. Major labor market disruptions have occurred in the past, such as farming having employed over 60% of the workspace in Europe and North America in 1800, while by 2010, it has employed 5% in the entire EU, and even less in the wealthiest countries. But this led to an ongoing process of disruption, causing more labor-intensive industries to move to places with lower labor costs. So, I mean, ultimately, if we control the displacement, then we might have a resultant economy that enjoys benefits from AI employment. But of course, the main theme here is control. Classic mechanical automation replaced human muscle, whereas digital automation replaced human thought or information processing, or at least like lower levels of human thought or information processing. So yet, unlike physical machines, digital automation is very cheap to duplicate. So this evokes a number of significant questions. One, will the effects be different this time? Two, will the creation of new jobs and wealth keep up with the destruction of jobs? Even if it is not different, what are the transition costs and who bears them? And four, do we need to make societal adjustments for a fair distribution of costs and benefits of digital automation?
Okay, on to neuroethics and neurotechnology. So, neuroethics, and particularly brain implants, have grown into a significant ethical concern. This is partly because of the risks of having possibly an AI or a learning model in your brain. But additionally, this is even more risky because patients are unable to just remove the implant. They can't one day wake up and decide, I don't want this control, or I don't want to have this in my brain anymore. They can't do that. They would have to make an appointment with their doctor and convince the doctor. And sometimes they may not even have the ability to make a decision because you're using your brain to make a decision. Yet the brain implant is in your brain. And so there's a lot of paradox. There's a lot of questions in there regarding whether or not they're actually making a decision or if there's some possible influence that we're unclear about. And plus, once you have something implanted in your brain, there's a lot of possible manipulations that could be done. Companies and a lot of organizations may think, what if they just slightly modulated your brain every time you saw an ad advertising like a drink or chips? Well, then over time, you would obviously want to buy those products. And so this is a slippery slope, which could be a fallacy, but this is something that can happen, which causes this loss of ethical consideration of whether or not we could modulate the activity of human brains. And this is especially disadvantageous for people with disabilities because they're most likely to be the people with implants at the start. For example, I do research at a lab where people with epilepsy have implants, and while their implants are not quite as advanced as AI, there is a lot of disadvantage to it. For example, people with Parkinson's have deep brain stimulation nodes in their brain, and who's to say that can't be modulated? They're just simple electrical stimulation nodes. So what if there was some sort of area to have outside manipulation? And so there's a lot of questions involved in how we can modulate a human's brain because the brain is fundamentally the root of all our decisions. Damian, is there anything you'd like to add?
Um, yeah, so neuroethics and neurotechnology bring some interesting perspectives into discussion, as Close discussed, and really it brings us back to fundamentally what neural networks are. Neural networks are just simulations of our own brain. So if we understand our own brain and even what human consciousness is, then that insight, that understanding, should be able to promote a better ability and enhanced ability to address the ethical issues at hand. Okay, yes. So thank you very much for coming. Some links have been provided if you're interested in further reading and some recent research and
I'll
research.
send them in chat as well.
And does anyone have any questions? It is.
And I also sent out the Airtable link. And so feel free to ask any questions. Thank you so much for coming. I'd
They
love
are
to.
indeed. Rocco's basilisk. So Rocco's basilisk is basically what AM is. And frankly, really, the main concern about AI ethics is that, as previously discussed, the rate at which AI is improving is already volatile and hard to predict, let alone when we get further down the line, and we like start to get to like full-on AGI, and then who knows how long it will be until we get to ASI. So if we really don't address these ethical concerns right now, um, then we are certainly going to have problems. Because it could easily just be a few months. It could like easily just be a few years before we get to get from the first full-on android to a Roko's basilisk-esque monster.
In regards to ethics, where would you think you would draw the line in terms of implementing it to machines and programming to AI? So I
So maybe
actually don't think there would be a line, just because the moment we reach one threshold that we previously thought either was impossible to do, unethical, there's always going to be someone who is adventurous and wants to go ahead and go farther than that.
um So yes, basically the threat level of intelligent systems increases with the level of intelligence. So AI can still do some bad things, and AI systems have already been capable of hacking into data systems and stealing secure data, and has already caused strife for many.
And
Now,
there's a oh,
it's not going to be as significant um, as the issues uh, caused by a super intelligent Logos Basilisk-esque system, but that doesn't mean it's not of a concern. And once again, with the slippery slope that is the rate at which technology advances, particularly in recent years, remember, the internet was only made a few decades ago and it's already what it is now. Um,
and
we
I don't know if you've heard of many governments video processing AIs, but there's a lot of ethical issues involved in that. A, there's people watching you from every security camera and identifying who you are. B, they've been trained possibly on biased data, which means that they might be biased towards a certain race or toward a demographic. And that is something that's really hard to solve. And that is an ethical issue that have been the subject of many complaints and has been in news for a very long time.
And also, a main issue is that the world is so big nowadays. There are billions of people. So, like, even if most people don't want ASI, who knows? Like, we're certainly not that far away from, at the very least, CGI, which is already who knows? Like, a group of like people that are very passionate about ASI, they could easily be the only people that want to develop ASI in the world. They could definitely be capable of doing that, and in a few decades, do so to the knowledge of no one else.
Exactly. And making ASI does make you somewhat of a like a superhero, or so at least gives you a lot more recognition. And a lot of people may be trying to work towards that, and you would never know
A lot
until you're dead.
a lot of people are pursuing it for technological fame, although the people that do it solely for that often aren't that successful.
That is true. But anyone, like OpenAI, Google's DeepMind, all of them are working on AI and trying to make a lot of trying to make advancements in AI. And they're already huge tech companies. They're attempting to do it for financial gain. Oh, you find it funny we're talking about ethics, even though social media isn't in any way ethical. I mean, social media, how is it unethical? I feel like social media could be somewhat harmful to the human condition just because there's a lot of comparison and mental
Social
disrespect involved, but I don't quite think it's unethical.
social media is so expansive and by this point such a vague term that there are both like many things that also fall in that category. There are myriads of good phases of that, but myriads of bad, I unethical ones too. And frankly, all it comes down to is what we interpret how what social media is and really how we address its usage. Like
It's really, I guess, if you abstract the unethicalness, it's really data and the privacy of data and not quite social media. So, someone brought up how Facebook ads can target specific political opinions. And once again, that's not quite social media in and of itself. It's really how people treat the data.
again, social media is such a vague term that again there are good and bad phases, and those individual phases are often their own issues that aren't really related to social media in and of themselves.
Yeah. So if there's any other questions, feel free to ping me or Damian in the Discord. Intention or effect? If you don't like social media this way. So in terms of AI and ethics, intention or effect, so I believe that possibly effect, because there's so many people who have good intentions and it ends up being very negative. So effect, we need a limit, even like just the range of the effect first, before actually figuring out what the intentions are, which is different for humans, of course.
Again, like basically anything can be used in an unethical manner. Like I could make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and use it in some grossly unethical way. But does that mean the peanut butter sandwich itself is unethical? because it's really not social media itself that is inherently unethical, as in there is no way to use it in an ethical way that benefits human society. And it's really about the people behind it. In the Facebook Cambridge Analytica political scandal, it was the underlying issue wasn't really social media, but what people can do with social media and the wrong intentions and like immoral intentions, i.e., collecting the data of millions of users for political advertising without their knowledge.
So if you think about it, the root of all our ethical issues are humans.
It's
So
very deep.
logically speaking, we should all just die. Okay.
That's actually a serious proposal by this point.
If you want to be ethical, we
Then we
should just all disappear. And then there'll be no ethical quandaries because we're the only species, I believe, that are actually unethical. Most other species are. Okay, this is obvious. I'm saying this very gently with no thought involved. I do think that we are the only species.
But Nietzsche, it's not necessarily Nietzsche would argue. He might actually argue for the opposite. But
this was a joke. Okay, I'm not going to commit to a genocide.
Philosophers have actually proposed a self-genocide of humanity as to eliminate all moral quandaries. Let's just eliminate ourselves.
Exactly. Or we should just not care about ethics. See, the thing is, we're stuck in this forever loop. Anything we use, they're just tools. The actual root are humans. If every human decided we're never going to make a single ASI, and actually no one did, then we'll have no issues with ethics. Like no more ASIs. We can make our lives easier with the very basic ANIs, but that's it. But no, someone always wants something. And so we'll never, ever, ever escape curiosity killed the cat. Okay, thanks, Miles. I'm really not going to commit suicide. It was a joke.
When you think about it, all issues aren't caused by things, but by us. That's very deep. Make an inspirational image about it behind an image of a mountain and then post it on a Facebook wall.
Exactly. It's not that Facebook, the website, wanted to post. You wanted to post.
Behind.
You wanted to post. And then you turn around and you complain about social media. You're like, ugh, social media dumb.
Problem. That solves all of virtue ethics because all humans are bad. Every single person is terrible, and everything we do is terrible, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay, I'm very sorry for this very depressing ending. Yeah, I'll send a link for attendance again. Okay, maybe we should stop the recording.
Yeah, we should stop.